And then Sev, when we introduce, like, I'll say, my name, then Nick will say his name, and then you can just chime in with your name, and then I'll continue the introduction.
You could say Sevwall if you'd rather do Sevwall.
Sevwall?
Okay.
If you, I mean, I know you don't care about your name being like mentioned, but in case people might just not know your name versus your Discord, is whatever you prefer.
Yeah, you can call me whatever on stream, but Bill Hayes is what I go by, like
Yeah.
as a name. So
Yeah, and then we like to leave it up just to the guests on how they want to be introduced. Though for the show credits, I do put like the names of the hosts in the metadata. What would you prefer?
metadata, you can put several.
Okay.
Like my general philosophy is I don't care if my name is said, but I try not to spread it around too much.
Yeah. No. A
Just
completely.
in the internet, unfiltered.
Yes. Completely understood. That's why I wanna ask.
Yeah.
All right, I think I'm think I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're gonna start. Hello and welcome to the 312 Squadron podcast. I am your host, Andrew Kuba.
And I'm Nick Sperry.
And I'm Bill Hayes, also known as Several.
And we are going to be discussing the 312 Conquest series. We just came up from the first series, the Windy City Trial, and we're here with the champion, Bill Hayes, and we are really excited to be discussing how the tournament went, what some of our insights are, and a little bit about where we're seeing the XWA meta going in general. So Nick, I'd like to pass it over to you for running the entire event. It was a ton of fun, but I would just love to hear what it was like from your perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So it's actually Windy City Trials, Windy City Conquest. It sounds similar. We've hosted so many Windy City Trials now that I don't blame you for getting the two mixed up. But for the viewers at home, Windy City Conquest happened this past weekend. Was it a week ago now? Let's see, on the 19th. So yeah, a weekend ago.
Yeah.
It's all a blur. It is the first of 9 series that we're hosting, one a month in different time zones, all the way through the end of the year when we have the global conquest. So kind of like a similar to Galaxies in some ways, if you guys remember GSP Galaxies, but these are one-day events with a top 2 final. So 4 to 5 rounds of Swiss, top 2 final for the champion. They win a cool plaque, and in this case, Sevwall also won a sealed Adepticon 2020 Chrome N1 Starfighter, so he got some extra hardware. I'll be dropping that off at the post office in a couple of days for him. And yeah, it's a great way to bring people together from all across the globe, play some online X-Wing, more accessible that way. And for us, more content, more to stream, just, be able to do more with giveaways. And it was a great first tournament. This one went really well. We had over 60 people signed up. We had, of course, always a few drops before the tournament started. And when 58 was the number we started with. And everyone seemed to have a lot of fun. I'm obviously going to throw it over to Sevwall in a moment to speak on how he saw things on his end as a player. I was wearing a bunch of different hats, streaming, TOing, helping with judging, and just logistics on the back end. But it all came together really well. The players really got the hang of it, and it's not their first rodeo, and it went smooth. And honestly, it's kind of the dream, because getting up extra early to host a 12-hour event from the beginning to check-in to the end of the final table stream and wrapping that up and posting about the winner. It's a full day, and a lot could go wrong. Thankfully, nothing really did. And I'm excited for the next one, which will entail me getting up at, I think, 1 a.m. Central Time. So yeah, we'll talk about that later. Sevwall, how was the tournament? And Andrew, you played in it too, but we'll throw it over to the champion first. So you guys can both talk about your experience playing in this conquest and just overall the series in general, what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, so I really like online tournaments. I don't have too much of a local scene, so most of the tournaments that I've been playing online in the last year or so have been online. I think it was run really well. It went. I compare it to I don't know if people played Galaxies. I feel like a lot of people who have played online X-Wing are probably familiar with Galaxies from Gold Squadron podcast back in the day,
Yeah.
and those were always run very effectively. And I feel like it felt just like being in those tournaments, where everyone got into a room and all the rules were clearly explained, and your time, it just very functional, very efficient, and there were really no problems with how it was run. So I give it like an A+ for
I
that.
paid him a lot of money to say that. A lot.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, so this actually was my first rodeo. This was my first online tournament where, I've recently joined the online leagues, but I was a little bit nervous on like how this was gonna go. I wanted to make sure that, it was easy for me to follow along and find out where I needed to be. So I think I was like one of the first people in the Discord room, which was actually one of the most fun introductions to a tournament that I could have had. It was just great talking with everybody in the Discord room. The conversation immediately went to Star Wars like lore and canon and stuff, and people debating like the movies. But it was honestly, it kind of felt as close to an in-store championship as I've been to online, where when you first show up, you're just saying hi to your friends, and everyone's just kind of having these like great conversations. It was such a relaxed environment. And it was really nice just to have the documentation there. Nick, you came on, explained all the rules. Like, I really felt that I didn't feel like I was out of place on anything, and it was easy for me to jump into TTS rooms. The responsiveness for the judges in chat, I want to say, was incredible. And
Yeah.
that really even made a difference in just like the tournament time, being able to get answers to questions that you had just so quickly. So I know you did such a great job there, and the other judging staff as well. um and also like I just had a good time. All the opponents were great. It was nice even having the lunch break in there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you guys both saying such nice things about how things were run. I mean, without really, stroking my ego, I do feel like just objectively things went very well. Obviously, if we were
Yeah.
hosting a tournament with 124 people online, who knows? There's a reason why I kind of set a tentative cap, though. I'm never really willing to run an event that big by myself. In the future, maybe if it's a joint effort. But for now, I think these 48 to 72 player sized tournaments are going to do really well for us in the community, and something that's manageable. On the judge side, I do want to shout out Maui, who really just kind of donated his time that day to just be around and answer questions and help out. And that was really huge. And appreciate Maui and the work he's doing, leading the rules team for XWA, and also helping us out, kind of puts the partnership in that blurb that we have about partnering with the XWA for this event. Those are examples on how we're doing that, partnering with people like Maui, like Sith Taker Tim, who's the OP planning lead. He helped do a little judging and commentary on our stream. And obviously, of course, Kester Smith helping us with Matt Carey and I to put together the trophies and the artwork for those from Curled Paw, which a lot of shout outs, but just kind of, it's really cool to partner with so many different people in so many different ways to put these tournaments together. And, I hope to continue to do things like that just beyond the series, going into next year as well. So yeah, but I do appreciate the mention of the judges, because I was really impressed with just how quickly people got their answers. I tried my best. I feel like I was impressed with myself with how quick I was able to remember to check Discord, because sometimes when I'm streaming, I forget, and it's hard. You can't really necessarily do that when you're running a tournament at the same time. You got to be all over the place. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And also, getting into the actual tournament itself, I I think that there was a kind of a lot of like cool takeaways that we could just have from the tournament. I mean, if you're listening, to this podcast, not sure if you're checking out like any of the roll better stats, or trying to keep up with, what the meta of the tournament brought. But I was really interested, like shocked at how many different and varied lists there were across the entire tournament. That was, even if I was like playing the same faction, I was just seeing completely different archetypes like in each faction too, which was wild.
Yeah, I
I
remember
don't
those
know.
were the days, right? I mean, we used to have
Yeah.
that a lot more often. Even at times in 2.5, we were AMG points. Earlier on, we were seeing more variety, and then we would get less variety and maybe a little bit more, and then it would be less again. And it seems like XWA has really leaned into uh, providing opportunities for that variety and getting back to the most variety we could possibly want in a semi, in a mostly balanced game, right? You can't ever perfectly balance a game like X-Wing, but um, Sev, you you brought a faction that benefits from some of the new content. What were your thoughts on what you saw? You don't have to necessarily do a bat reps or anything, but you brought Scum, and just how did that all pan out, and what was your experience going through Swiss?
Yeah, I mean, I put this list together mainly to fly with Boba. He's been one of my favorite characters in Star Wars for a long time, and I've always liked to play him. I have never managed to use his previous incarnation terribly well in Scum, so I figured I would give this one a shot and see how it worked. Um, I think the new SLs from XWA have been pretty well balanced to not break the format open like some of the AMG SLs did,
Yeah.
but also not be terrible. So like I used to feel like when SLs would come out, there was a pretty even. You could pretty much draw a line down the middle, put some cards in the I'm never going to use pile, and put some cards in the I'm always going to use pile. And then occasionally there were a few that you weren't so sure about. I feel like the XWSLs have been very much on that middle line where sometimes you're going to want to use them, sometimes you're not going to want to use them, but you're never entirely sure that it is like an obvious great choice.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing with this list is to just kind of figure out what works with Boba and what doesn't. So I've spent the last since the SLs came out just kind of experimenting. And this is actually the first time that it clicked. This list has not been doing terribly well for me outside of this because I was trying different things like Dengar, and if we want to discuss the list specifically, we
Yeah,
can do
why
that
don't
later,
you?
but
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you mind actually telling us what you flew? Just that way makes it easier for whenever you refer back to it. You don't have to then uh,
yeah.
break it down later.
So I have custom Cad Bane with Composure because I have a point, synced laser cannons and proton rockets. Those are both two very great cards with Cad. The synced laser because it just gives him the 3 dice, and proton rockets because combined with his ability to prevent you from modding shots or modding with green tokens defensively in his bullseye, proton rockets are pretty devastating.
Yeah.
Also, Boba Fett. Um, Let me bring up the list itself because I'm looking at Roll Better, which doesn't break down the cards. And funny enough, I'm actually one of my problems with this list is remembering all the individual pieces and what they do. Um, Boba, he's obvious. The new version of him wants to take locks on ship. He's entirely lock dependent, which puts him in kind of a weird place where he's very strong if you're making the correct decisions about what you want to lock and when you want to lock it. But if you do that wrong, he feels ineffective. And
Yeah.
occasionally you can run up against a list that has anti-lock tech. Like Gorin is pretty popular in Empire at the moment. And that
Yeah.
it doesn't ruin him. He still functions. But you just have to be very careful about what you're doing, when you're doing it, and probably focusing on Gorin a lot with Boba. So that's the homing beacon ability that ties into it that lets him lock from outside range 3. That's critical to his play. You're always going to be wanting to lock range 1. So you want to make sure you have a good plan going into it because you're going to be making those key decisions about how you're playing turn 1, the moment you start.
Yeah.
Fennec Shan ties into that. If you are attacking or receiving an attack from a locked ship, they roll 1 less dice against you. Very frustrating for your opponent, but also a little bit frustrating for you as the Boba player because you kind of never ever want to spend your lock.
Yep.
Even in
Yeah.
situations, so like some nominal situations, like let's say you roll blank hit against a ship with 2 defense dice normally. If you spend that lock, you might get 3 attacks, but they're definitely getting an extra defense dice. So every time you spend that lock with Boba, you're losing some offensive. You're giving them some additional defensive power, so you have to be really careful with Boba. And a lot of the times when you're flying Boba, you'll feel like you don't have a target lock. Like all you're doing is rolling, natural dice, and sometimes hopefully modding it with a focus shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah,
he's got seismic charges, which is great for when you want to just with your pathing, you can kind of finish people off with your charges. And then the card that I always forget, which is Slave One. Same as the standard, when you're in their back arc, you get crits. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something about Boba?
No, I was going to say that, yeah, that ability, it makes spending that lock a really tough decision. You have to be very tactical on when you want to do it. And yeah, oftentimes it just feels like you just kind of leave the target lock on and you just play it as if you don't even have the lock.
Yeah, and that's not to complain about Boba. Boba's great, obviously. He's a very good card, but I just
Yeah.
want to highlight that unlike there are some ships in the game where you're not making a lot of tough decisions with, like, things just kind of flow more naturally. Like Defender Vader, not a terribly popular pilot at the moment. But when you're flying Defender Vader, you're brute forcing your way through things, and your decisions are pretty obvious. With Boba, a lot of the decisions are slightly more painful, and you can get just as well rewarded for them as you can with any other ship. More so, in some cases. His ability to fire, I don't know if I mentioned it, but his pilot ability is if a ship that you have locked, attacks someone other than you, you can perform a bonus attack against them. That's devastating when it works, but you have to be setting yourself up in the right positions, with the right pathing, locking the right targets. So there are many ways to mess that up during a game. And in the tournament, I felt like that was clicking for me, whereas in my previous experiences, it wasn't. So just to kind of highlight, when I go through the whole list, I'll talk about my experiences with the list overall, but it's not a brute force list.
What would you say? What would you say is like something that you generally know for a fact, and that you're limited time playing this archetype or Boba himself, that you don't want to go up against, that you feel like is kind of a deterrent or a counter to what you brought?
So I6 is rough because you want to try to make sure that you can get your arc on somebody, because it doesn't matter who you lock if you're not pointed at them. If you don't have your firing arc over someone that you have locked, you don't punish them for attacking someone. You're not more effective attacking them with their one less defense dice, and they don't have to attack you. So the fact that they roll one less dice against you doesn't really matter. That can also sometimes happen with I5s. I've had games against FO where the obvious lock and person to punish was Kylo Ren. And then if you win the initiative roll every round and Kylo Ren is effectively I6 against you, you run into the same problem. So that's the most common thing that happens. As I mentioned before, Gorin is a problem. He can remove locks. The obvious answer there. A lot of the Empire lists at this tournament were interesting because a lot of them felt like Gorin lists but didn't have Gorin. So I didn't really run into it here, but I've run into it in practice.
But you didn't have to play Andrew.
Yeah.
I was running Gorin and found him very effective against a lot of lists in the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then just lists that can. I played against a CIS list that was a 7-ship CIS list, and they killed Boba relatively quickly, and that's pretty devastating to this list. So things that can kill Boba are a problem.
Sure.
Boba.
Yeah, I guess that goes for any
obvious,
Boba.
But like, yeah, it sounds obvious, but he's kind of a linchpin to the list in a couple different ways. He has a lot of threat that he puts out by picking a target and saying that target is really bad against him. So the more ships that your opponent has, the less you picking an individual target matters, and the more they have the ability to kill Boba, get 7 points from you, remove a big threat, and then go from there.
How is Mando? And you're like, give me your overview and maybe opinion on flying the Mandalorian. He's a 4-point. He's not a filler. Obviously, he's got definitely had as a decently high ceiling, but he's he's in your list. I think you probably, I would assume you don't have super high expectations for him, but you hope to put him in a good position to do some damage, right? Like, what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah. So the last two ships are the Mandalorian in the N1 and Fenrau. So that, just to give you a sense of like everything that's in the list. The Mandalorian is there to get into a flank position and then continue dealing ship damage over the course of the game, or if the game plays out where like each of you has one guy on the flank, his job is to just kind of harass the enemy flanker or use his I-5 to continually claim in something like scramble the transmissions. But I'm not relying on him to do all that much other than be the idea of a threat. He needs to do something. I can't just run with him all game, because this list, in order to function, really needs like 4 things that are threatening. I ran a version of this list that was Cad Bane, Boba Fett, SL Dengar, and Sarko in the quad jumper. And I always ran into problems with that list where I only really had 3 threatening things. So it was too easy for the enemy to focus on killing one of those 3 things, leaving me with 2 threats left, and that in a game of X-Wing isn't always enough. So the Mandalorian is good because he, with his outmaneuver and with his ability to get bullseye and the force so that like he can roll to get bullseye and still mod his shots, the Mandalorian can always do actual real damage while also being a ship that can run. From the perspective of just the ship itself, I was talking about how the SLs, like, it's a lot of them fall in the line. I don't really think the Mandalorian falls in the line. I think that ship is very clearly good. Not because it's too strong, but because Scum doesn't have a ship like the N1 that can slam at I-5, cares about, like, very effective when it gets behind you, and can play objectives as well as the Mandalorian does. So I think that it's a very clear winner for the faction because it provides Scum something. It provides them a ship that they just didn't have. That it doesn't replace anything because it didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm.
The types of play that you can do with the Mandalorian in Scum are unique and help fill a weakness in the faction. So that's another reason why he's here, is just, you can't, if I couldn't take the Mandalorian in the 4-point slot, I'd have to take some kind of bruiser type ship that can't get around people and can't focus on objectives, and he's just invaluable to be able to spend 4 points to get something that can do.
Yeah, I mean, what are your other options? Like, I guess, like, for I-5, it'd be Dirge, right? I mean, Dirge has always been kind of that de facto 4-point piece for so long for Scum. To have other types of options is good. You know, I'm curious.
Yeah.
I got to see him a bit over the course of the tournament. You and Doug, Doug and Andrew played on stream, and that was quite a game to watch. Very entertaining. I know Andrew's going to beat himself up over that game a bit, but it was very, on the streaming side, it was a very fun game to watch, and it's interesting to see how people approach using Mando, but it seems that the consensus is you have to at least try to get him to be a flanker. Like, he's not just someone that you can throw in the middle of the board and come up through the middle or whatever, unless that's where your opponent is not setting up. He will just die immediately, and you don't want to get him killed so fast. He can be an X factor, I think, in a list that maybe you don't expect him to be, but he has the potential for it.
Well, also, he's a piece that your opponents can't ignore at the same time. It provides, in the Scum list, it makes your opponents have to make that tough choice of how they're going to set up, because they do have to dedicate some ships to deal with the Mandalorian, and those are ships that are not now dogpiling on the aces and the linchpins in your list.
Right. Real quick, Andrew, I wanted to ask you too. You played, and you got the hunger to play again because you signed up for the Crumpet Conquest.
I'm going to be
3rd.
up at. Yeah, I'm going to
we'll
be
both be up
in the morning
early
with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, joining me in solidarity there.
I'm
Um,
going to Trader Joe's and I'm going to actually get some crumpets from there too. So I'll be enjoying that as my breakfast
yeah,
to keep it on
maybe
theme.
maybe I should get some and I can review them on stream. I think I kind of need to do something like that. Does Mariano's have them? I'll find out. But anyways, what was your experience? Talk about, you brought a Gorin list. You can talk about that. And this is, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, this is kind of your first, like you mentioned, this is your first like online tournament, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Go-
This is my
what
first
was it like?
large online tournament. Yeah, like I said, it was great chatting with everybody in the morning. I brought my list that I had practiced with. So I had been noticing that there were a lot of boba and scum players out there, and also some of the republic lists and resistance lists that like to take a lot of target locks and depend on that. So that's kind of why I chose to go with a Gorin list, and had been practicing that for a couple weeks, which for those games where those target locks mattered, it was a huge benefit. Started off very strong, played probably some of the best, closest games of X-Wing that I have ever played in my life. By round 3, I was kind of happy to be in my own home just because of just how like exhausted I was like mentally, and just being able to go and get like food from the fridge and not have to walk that far and get like water was like huge. Um, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And the caliber of players that I was playing up against were also just so competitive, and it was super fun going through like all of my games, for every faction, really having to like sit, read, and try to understand my opponent's list because they were so different and unexpected than a lot of the lists that I was even practicing against going into this. So I really made me consider, what my game plan was, what my win conditions were, and it was a challenge, for me just to even identify the targets. I was thrilled with, how I started, 3-0, and then kind of, at the end there, even on stream, like I think you could kind of tell the moment where like I think my brain just kind of gave out. And I started just making some poor like decisions and stuff, but still overall super fun, and my opponents were great as well, and it was a pleasure just talking with them on stream too. But I yeah, overall I think that this is probably one of like the healthiest like metas and places that we've seen, and it's just been so interesting for this being one of the first like major XWA, like online XWA tournaments, to kind of see what everyone's bringing to the table, because I still think that it hasn't really been figured out or solved by a long shot.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the insights on the faction side, I was one of the main with the timing of this tournament and the new content that had just come out. I think a lot of us are asking ourselves, what's the faction representation going to be like when factions get new content? Typically, there's a spike in terms of how many people bring them to a tournament, and Sevwall winning the tournament with Scum at second place. It was 16.95, or about 17% of lists were Scum. Resistance, though, number one, 25%. So a quarter of the entire field was Resistance, which they did benefit from new content. The Evacuation of Dakar and Armed and Dangerous are the two packs that came out for three factions: Resistance, First Order, and Scum. And we did see, honestly, almost, let's see, what does that end up being? A little over 41% of the field, just Scum and Resistance. And then you get what's really interesting is going from there. You're like, okay, well, First Order, right? First Order got that new Kylo. They have these new SFs, these new FOs. No, bear with me. Is Rebels and Empire tied at about 15% each represented in this tournament, and then you get to First Order at fifth with only 10%. So I think we'll get back to that point in a second on FO, but I believe that at least as of right now, the faith in the new content, they don't feel like the power level is is at the same level maybe as Scum and Resistance, at least in this tournament. That is a hypothesis you could create, that maybe FO players either just didn't play in this tournament, which is FO players are a pretty dedicated bunch, or they didn't feel like maybe Kylo was enough for them. Kylo and friends. And then we got the Grand Army of the Republic and CIS as the last two at both 8%. So CIS dominating in XWA for so long, pretty much almost unbeatable in the hands of someone who knew how to play the faction.
Yeah.
Not represented super well in this one, but we did see a Django Zam make top 4, so there is that. And we saw a Darth Maul list get top 8 in there as well, which is cool. So
they had a 56% win rate. I mean, overall, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so not brought a lot, but the people who did played well is basically what that ends up meaning, which is good.
That's been the story for the Separatist faction since the dawn of X-Wing.
Yeah, Isofate always proves that statistic too. Whenever he brings CIS, he's one of the few, and he always does very well with it. But let's talk about First Order really quick. And we'll talk about Resistance, of course, and a little bit more on Scum in a moment. But I don't really believe in I don't think the new content is there's anything wrong with it. I think it's a misleading claim to say that FO didn't get enough. However, I have seen some people try to make that claim. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on FO. Sev, I'll ask you first, and then Andrew, if you want to chime in after. FO with the new stuff, the new toys.
Yeah, so I'm primarily an Empire, Scum, and FO player. Not necessarily in that order, but those are the 3 factions that I played the most. I had a lot of success in the draft league with FO in the first 2 seasons that I was in there. So I don't think I just have a lot of experience with the faction.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the SLs specifically, talking about how they affect the faction, I don't know that they are any better or any worse than the Scum SLs or the Resistance SLs. I think when I was talking about a lot of the cards being on the line, I still feel like that's true for FO. I feel like playing as a Scum player, that the SLs in Scum gave me new and different ways to do things that I didn't have access to before. Like a fire spray that I want to play and put on the table, and the N1 is just completely new. I don't play Resistance enough, but I look at Resistance and I see 2 Resistance bombers that do things that you really wanted bombers to be able to do that they couldn't just really do before. You have Stomaroni, who is essentially a new Chasis, an A-Wing with X-Wing stats. And even Poe, to some extent, just kind of is a bit of a newer version of that ship. It takes it a little further. When I look at the FO stuff, I'm looking at ships that mostly seem to be doing the same thing that I could do now in a different way. So I could always roll a bunch of attack dice with my TIE FOs. Those were the ones that you would take. You'd take Scorch or DT. Whenever you're playing Malorus or Midnight, you're taking away to get that 3rd dice. So the new FO TIE fighters provide that in a different way, but I'm still kind of doing the same thing I was trying to do before. TIE SFs, they're a big thing. Having mobile arcs, rolling 3 dice. The new SFs do that same thing too. They do it with munitions, which is interesting and unique. They're definitely different to play, but I'm still sort of doing the same thing. And then Kylo, 7-point Kylo, is doing things that I used to be able to do before with Kylo until they changed him down to 6 points. So I think that people will integrate these new SLs into FO, and people will want to play FO with them. I just don't know if it's the first faction I leapt to. Like, I play FO in Scum, and I chose to do Scum because there's a lot of interesting new stuff that I can do that I couldn't do before. I imagine that's probably the same for Resistance people who were putting that stuff on the table. I just don't quite feel like
that's fair though, right?
Extend with FO.
Nothing new, no new chassis feeling you're getting from the additions to First Order, which a lot of people have described FO as being the faction that just feels the most limited because it has such a limited number of options across the chassis they can use.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty reasonable assessment. I honestly think it's fairly objective when it comes to just like the fact that there is no new there isn't a new pilot that uses a different dial for its ship like Stomarani does in Resistance, right? First Order simply just didn't get that. And it's not normal to get stuff like that. You know, it's kind of breaking new ground in that regard. But still, I mean, the new Kylo, 7 points, but very aggro, right? Like he has the proton torpedoes, he has the extra force, he is just he can add results when he has people in bullseye taking damage like there, and that's something restricted only to him. There's a few of the other pilots that get to do that as well that were added to FO, but at the same time they're still in existing chassis, and you know, that's a good point. I agree with that. I understand where you're coming from with that.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, I don't even know though if it even comes down to, excitement level, from the online, testing that I've been doing, and even like from what I'm hearing in the NCX, draft league, uh, that I'm a part of. uh, the feedback I've been getting from FO players is that the new SL, the SLs are pretty good. LaHughes is a huge problem for a lot of player. The new Theta and like Zeta FO fighters are do a great job punching above their weight when you can exploit that. And so, and it's the same too, where it's the FO variants are not even like the Hughes in the SL version is a different flavor completely than you fly him in a different list in a different way than you would the build your own Lahuse. So FO, I think too, of all the lists, their SLs are the ones where the decision is harder in that middle ground because it isn't obvious when you should take an SL, when you shouldn't. What they do is open up different archetypes within the faction, but I think that it's a faction that has more diamonds in the rough that you have to spend more time playing with to pull out ways that you can use those new cards, even the old cards, to make your archetype in certain lists click, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
it
think
makes
that
sense.
the ceiling for what you can do with the FO as a faction is higher than what we think right now. I think that for all the factions, with the complexity of FO's build archetype, which is the hurt your friends to give yourself bonuses and power, it does require a little more finesse to like find out what clicks than maybe some of the other like factions do in filling like those pieces with their archetype.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I was just curious. I know that our last team league was before the new First Order content had come out. But their overall win rate in that was 39%, just round up to 40. It's like 39.7. And then in looking at the incredibly small sample of this one tournament, um, the least number of games played at 23, which makes sense. Not many people bring the faction. There's not as many games played. 7 and 15 overall, 30% win rate. What I would be curious is if I were 10 tournaments from now, enough data that I crunched it and averaged it out. If that win rate, what I'd want to see is that win rate is at above like 44 or 45%, or in that general range. It being 30 to 40 does not inspire, I think, confidence long term. And obviously the new content it's objectively good. It's not going to make the faction worse. It would be concerning if that number dropped. If you go from the team league data around 40%, which is acceptable but not good, to being closer to 30-35, I think what the story would just be that people aren't bringing it as much because they don't want to. And First Order is already kind of a fickle bunch of players. Like you don't just have First Order players don't tend to also be Rebel players. I think Sevval plays Empire. That makes sense. I think FO players, if there's any other faction that they would also play, would probably be Empire, because there are similarities and overlap with ace choices, TIE fighters, etc. But it's just something to keep in mind. I think it's way too early, as we all can kind of agree. It just is, and the sample doesn't really exist. But just so far from what I'm looking at, First Order does need to improve. And I would hope that the next few events that we run, we I want to stream more FO games. We were able to do a couple for the Windy City Conquest, but I hope we see people bring more FO. You know, it's what's another interesting point. There was something else I was going to bring up. If I look at just our top 8, and this is slightly off topic, but going through all the factions, the only 2 factions, there's 3 factions not represented in the top 8. It's Rebels, Empire, and First Order. And I think there's a number 10 finisher that had Rebels, so pretty close. They could have made top 8. They went 4-1, but then to find FO,
yeah, 29th.
29th, yeah. So similar archetypes between the 28th and 29th player, or 29th and 30th place players. They both brought FO. They both had Kylo in there. But yeah, I mean, it's really just you brought up a point about taking damage. You know, that in the meta, it's objectively can be really, really risky to be even taking 1 extra damage to add a result. You know, that aggressive nature that is very thematic for First Order could come back to haunt you, especially if ship counts still average closer to 5. You know, 1 extra shot you're taking is very dangerous.
Taking all those strain tokens, or you know, a lot of FO abilities turn on when they lose like their shields and stuff. Yeah. And then also too, I mean, this is a tournament that had 2 chance engagements as well. So like for all the tournament, like for the games that we play, and you know, that it would be interesting to see, you know, how that also kind of determined some of
I mean, would chance be more beneficial, Sevwall, to First Order right now? Like, I feel like it can't be that, like, of the couple of scenarios that they wouldn't mind playing, I feel like chance would be one of them, right?
I haven't. I could talk for like 45 minutes about First Order.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of opinions on that faction in XWA at the moment. I don't know if chance is good or bad. It really depends a lot on what you're playing against.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you're playing FO, if you look at it is kind of depressing to have to scroll down to 29th to see the first FO person here. Yeah. But like if you look, they don't. There's no like consensus really in these various lists. Like I think a lot of people play a lot of different First Order lists and what you put your pieces, like how you put your pieces into your list. But I think playing against First Order, a lot of the times, it doesn't really matter what you're playing against. A lot of it feels the same. Unless they're really going out of their way to fly like 4 Silencer, or they put like an Upsilon on the table or something. So I think part of First Order's problem at the moment is that there's not a lot of different things that they can do. There's just a lot of different ways that they can do it. So what that means is that when you put your First Order list on the table, it's not so much about what you have, it's what your opponent has, because they have things that are going to counter like the idea of First Order and what it can do, or else they're not going to have that sort of stuff. So I feel playing First Order, I feel like that's much more of the factor in how well you do than what scenario you get per se. Like I don't think that they're any better or worse than chance at other factions. You know, to a meaningful degree. I think it's kind of more about what you line up across from.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was doing pairings for the team league, I was like, for FO, I was like constantly, it was scramble or chance. It was like it couldn't be assault and salvage. Like salvage, I think in the past in 2.5 FO was a lot better at, but now I'm like, you know, Magpul's tech is different, and rightfully so. Like, you know, so I think First Order is one of those factions that maybe is more matchup dependent than others right now. I mean, I think Resistance and Scum, it's interesting to mention Scum in that in this category, are a little bit more flexible. And in 2.5 with scenarios, you do need to be more mindful of flexibility across your matchups and scenarios that it factors into your matchup. You know, it's I think FO is one of those factions that is just more adverse to who it goes up against. And these things ebb and flow a lot with the meta. Scenarios always kind of add a little bit of a linchpin thing to consider when it comes to how you build your lists. But at the same time, I think it is difficult to be able to fully lean into just, oh, well, I won't play the objective. I could just blow up all my opponent's ships. That is a strategy that is very bold and a little, it's a little too grandiose. It doesn't really work that way. That's not, your opponent has agency in pretty much everything that they do and how they set up. So you do have to be mindful of that building list that can at least try to play the objective. And FO, I think Assault is really the more obvious one where it really struggles, unless you bring an Upsilon, which is going to take up a ton of your list, or a medium base in the Xi shuttle, which will never really do any damage at all and will die very quickly if it's getting shot at. You just won't really score many objective points, and your opponents have access to a lot of tools that will allow them to farm assault points. So it's just another thing. Like Sevall said, you can talk about FO for a long time. I feel like it's a little cathartic talking about FO because I've wanted to talk about this stuff for a while with this faction and just kind of haven't, because I know that there are a lot of things that are developing and this faction is going to shift around a bit. But they've kind of been at the bottom for a while. This isn't a new development. They have struggled for months before the new content, going all the way through the team league and in testing before, in the first few iterations of beta points. They were staying at the bottom. They were not doing well. So I'm excited to see the prospect of them being more middle of the pack as they have been historically, where they're not ever going to really blow anyone away with the number of people who bring them and the sheer number of people who make cut with FO. But there will be people in cut with FO. There will be people in the top 16, a couple players with FO. That's what I feel like I need to see to feel more confident in where they're heading. And it's going to be difficult because they just don't have a lot of choices still. It comes down to that a lot of the times with that faction. So that's my rant. That's my TED Talk, my X-Wing TED Talk on First Order. But
I do find it interesting looking.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I do find it interesting looking at the First Order lists here. Is that what I don't see? What I think the XWA did a very good job when they introduced the Red Fury Zealots to First Order. Those are the Whispers without the config, I think it is.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a title for that. They can't jam, but they're 3 points. They can take Fanatical and Advanced Optics, and they're extremely good at objective play, going around the table while getting lots of, 2-hit shots. And they're very good at avoiding dying because they can go very fast. And as someone who plays FO a lot, I do feel like when the XWA introduced that, it was kind of like a real help to the faction. And I'm curious if people are kind of ignoring it because it feels like a nerf to the Whisper because they don't have the config, so you can't do the cool jam stuff that you're used to. But it's just an incredibly efficient ship. And with all the hype for Dakar and all the new SLs, just if you're, I feel like there's some unexplored space here, especially since it doesn't look like anyone flew them. For people to experiment around with them and maybe have some more success with the faction than they've been having so far.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much like it's almost a 3-point X-Wing with a better dial.
I mean, and for how long has FO just basically been the faction where it's like, all right, do you want Kylo? Do you want Von Reg? And then Malrus Scorch, DT? There's just kind of like a handful of like your all-star roster that you picked from, and that was essentially it. There was a couple of filler choices from there, but it was like the same smattering of the same options. I think that those 3-point whispers does kind of open the door for a little bit, maybe some more aggressive opportunities to incorporate more choices for the faction. At least we know what needs to be addressed. I think everybody in XWA knows, okay, well, it's just choices. It's really, that is the biggest hurdle for this faction, is like, once you get past that, there a lot could happen for FO. And I know this is kind of turning into a First Order simp podcast here, just but it's good to talk about. That's a good point. I mean, bringing in the Whispers kind of just opens the door for there to be like, okay, well, if I'm seeing a Whisper, it's not going to be Kylo, or it's not going to be like Whirlwind. Or there's a couple other that people sometimes bring. Hey, like it's nice to be reminded that there are other pilots for the chassis
Right.
that you see the same faces in all the time.
Well, this is something that we've been talking about a lot previously before, XWA with Scum and the AMG points, where, we were saying that it's a faction that was missing those options. If it had access to the extended ship pool, that would just be a huge boon for the faction of itself. And I think that we even seen that with the new SL cards coming out, that it filled a lot of gaps that the faction really needed to thrive, and it has. And there's no arguing that. And so I think that bringing that same logic to what can be done for first order is I think pretty apt.
Yeah, and the new content for First Order, it provides it. I think what ends up going back to what Seval had mentioned earlier is that it basically gives you a similar power level to what you've already been used to. It's like, you have this or you have this. Both of them are going to kind of achieve something similar or, in the same ballpark. It's really that X factor of like this gap of like feeling new, like this feels really new and something that we haven't had before kind of thing that will get them to the promised land of being back towards the middle of middle of the pack where they belong. Um, let's talk about that top 8 really quick. If you guys go over to Pattern Analyzer, um, and you go to squads from left to right, it'll break down the top place finisher, which is Seval, of course, to the other lists that finished top 8 overall. So these 8 players receive their invites to the Global Conquest, which will be in December, date to be announced. For those of you considering playing or already signed up to play in future ones, these will roll down. So let's say Seval finishes, in Gotham City, he finishes 8th. It'll roll down to the 9th place player, assuming they don't have an invite because he already has his invite. So just keep that in mind. There are going to be a lot as the series continues and goes on through the year. There will be more opportunities. It'll be a little bit easier to get your invite as more people who have already gotten theirs continue to play as well. So Sev talked about his 4-ship scum list. His the second place finisher Brendo playing in the final table. Lots of candlelight vigils for all the ships that exploded in that game. That was very entertaining. That game snowballed very fast. It was. I don't think anyone was truly prepared for how quickly things would go Sevwall's way in the matter of a few minutes. But you did what you needed to do, Sev, and Brendo's ships exploded. Brought an Empire list. It's a 5-shipper. It was really cool. There's just a lot of everything in this list, chassis wise, in terms of abilities, power level, everything. Battle over Endor Soon tier at the top. Echo with Juke and Lone Wolf. That is the custom TIE Phantom pilot. Magnetolvin for the coordinating and the ion cannon squad leader combo. Lieutenant Karsabi, the 3 points. Gunboat or Star Wing with ion cannon, the assault config to shoot while disarmed. An advanced slam. Then you have double edge with barrage rockets and dorsal. That's in the another extended ship. That's in the help me out, guys, which is the TIE aggressor. Thank you.
Wow, haven't seen that.
Yeah, a cheap 3-point barrage rocket carrier and a dorsal for potential double taps with double edge's ability, and then an Obsidian Squadron pilot. So a 6-ship list. I honestly, Brendo, they're playing in salvage mission, which is really, not everyone's favorite cup of tea, not everyone's favorite scenario. Not really great for Scum for Seval's list versus Brendo's list, and Brendo tried very hard to grab as many crates as possible, and Seval took the I'm just going to blow you up approach and knocked a lot of them off and basically just stopped that from really snowballing. Salvage is one of those where if you don't get the RNG with the crits and you don't get the kills you need, even if you are out damaging your opponent, they can still kind of run away with the game if they have 3 or 4 crates. Sev, what were you thinking going into that matchup? So salvage, you probably weren't thinking like, oh, I'm gonna lose this, but you probably figured it would be a bit of an uphill climb, right?
Yeah. Going into it, I was really just mostly thrilled that he didn't have Goran, not because Goran's like better or worse in this list per se than Echo or anything else that he took, but just against my list in particular, it's kind of it's rough. It limits my decisions. everything went my way this game. That's all. That's kind of all that happened. He got Karsabi. He put Karsabi aggressively in front, and turn 1 I was able to deal 4 damage with a procket and pass him a stress, and that was kind of how that game went for him. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good list. I think that a lot of times people talk about Goran lists because Goran is usually part of these lists, but I think this helps illustrate that the strength of Goran lists are in the cheap ships that he gets to take with him.
Mm-hmm.
Double Edge, Karsabi, and Magna are not good because Goran exists. They're good because they're great.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's another Empire list. I don't know if it was in the top 8. But there was another Empire list I played against in round 4, I think. Where it was similar, where they had a lot of the low initiative ships that usually feature in Goran lists, but they didn't have Goran. Just kind of because of kind of how strong it is. So
yeah, they're definitely just good on their own. I know, like for my list, I brought Faroff, Goran, Countdown, Scimitar 1, and Ubel. There's a lot of Scimitar 1 out there who for the I3. Faroff is an I3 as well. So even in that that list, I only have 2 ships that Goran can really can really affect, but Scimitar 1 is just so strong on its own that your opponents are would rather shoot at Scimitar 1, but they have to deal with Goran because they can't do anything to Scimitar 1 until Goran's gone. And it just forces those tough choices.
Yeah, and this list just forces those tough choices in a different way by having Echo and Soontir there. So same way, like you can focus. I mean, he doesn't have Scimitar 1, but you could focus on Double Edge or Karsabi to try to take them off the table. But if you're doing that, you're ignoring Soontir or Echo, who can be putting, instead of making their ships more survivable, just killing you.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a great list for second place. It has the high initiative in there, but it also has, I mean, every single piece is good on its own.
Yeah. We got to see a classic Soontir direct hit die moment as well. Yep. It was one of those, just one of those games where you just kind of know you're not meant to win. Brendo just it was determined early that it wasn't going to be it was going to be difficult for Brendo to be able to pull this one out, and things did just kind of favor Sevwall in terms of a little bit of RNG, but obviously both. I think Sevwall made some really good moves, especially springing on Karsabi with the proton rocket early. That was something that I don't think anybody expected, but when you have the ability to decloak and then do your maneuver bank into the focus, or the bank boost focus, or rather focus bank boost, definitely can make that happen, and can catch your opponent by surprise. So yeah, it was a very it was cool to see Scum really hit. I feel like the ceiling was kind of hit in that game in a way. I know that again, some things just kind of went your way, Sev, but with new content especially, it's cool to see just exactly what even a 4-ship list is capable of, including a more fringe 4-point piece in the Mandalorian.
Yeah, that game just went my way. It's actually the whole tournament I was going. I think my scores ranged from so I had one 13 to 21 game, I had 3 16 to 21 games, and one 15 to 21 games. So like things really could have just broken a different way. Like if you notice those scores, all of them are within 7 points. So if I lose Boba in some of those games, like the game's over and I'm not in finals. So just unfortunately for Brendo, it just really didn't work out for him that game.
Yeah, I mean that's
it ended for me, but not
right. right. I mean, as I've said in the past, to be able to make cut and win it all, you have to have fortune. Fortune has to favor you. There's dice exist in this game and are very much a big part of it as well. Like you don't stumble into winning a tournament.
Right.
If you're hitting rocks, if you're running in yourself, I firmly believe in a game like X-Wing, if you make a lot of mistakes, you do not deserve to win. You do not. It's just, and that's how you learn. You should not be able to get away with making a slew of mistakes. Everyone makes maybe 1 or 2 errors. You can recover from a self bump. You can recover from clipping an obstacle. There are ways that you can recover. But if you ultimately are underperforming and your opponent is just objectively playing better than you, they deserve to win. And then obviously if you're doing things that don't include making a lot of mistakes and you have some luck, that's how you win it all. So
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, we were talking about this before. You have to be good, but once you're in the top 8, then that luck also takes over, I think, a little bit more because everybody there is good.
right, yeah, you at least know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Known commodities
And
of good players.
X-Wing is a game of gambles and strategy regardless. Even from turn 0, you have to make that choice. You have to guess, is your opponent going to play this aggressively? Are they going to slow roll it and hold back? And you have to, there is that point where these pivotal moments in the game where you have to kind of make that big play that will give you the best chance of winning, but it could still, depending on what your opponent does, if you guess wrong, could be the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we saw that, I think, in this final game where uh, they both players, the Empire player played really aggressively, was maybe betting that Sevwall wasn't going to be coming out as aggressively and as strongly as they did. They went the strategy of, if they could be in a position to capture the objectives and get those points early in the game, that they could win it from there. And sometimes you make that guess and it just doesn't go your way.
Yeah, and road rolls are really, I mean, going back to luck, road rolls are magnified in games of more significant importance as well. You tend to not forget when you're playing at a high level that you went first 6 rounds in a row, for example. It's stuff like that. Certainly can dictate a lot. It's hard to even quantify exactly what it dictates, but that it matters a lot because more information for your opponent than you get, and so on. Especially when it comes to scramble. Scramble and road are not my friend. I do not like those two together. Keep them in separate rooms. We had, so third and fourth, we had 2 CIS lists. I'm just going to quickly run through these. And if anybody wants to chime in, feel free. Maybe wait to the end when I'm done with the 8, and then we can talk about anything that stands out to you. We had Le Chancellor, who's one of our longtime Discord community members, Andrew Prevost. When we first started doing leagues, Andrew was playing in these. Yet another Andrew, sweet guy, really talented X-Wing player, and he has his own stream on Twitch, La Chancelier. You can check that out. He streams in French, X-Wing games. He brought Darth Maul in the Scimitar, and gosh, is that thing with the combination of hate, malice, Palpatine, and the title really filthy. I took a damage and also take a stress. I took a damage, take a stress. Basically free stress passing, because every time he gets a force back, he can spend it after and just basically just deliver stress tokens and hinder everybody that takes a shot at him. He can double tap really well. Grievous is in this list with his Impervium plating and Solus 1. And then he has DBS 404 in the Hyena, Plasmas, Energy Shells, Landing Struts, DIS 347 with Deadeye Shot, Energy Shell Charges, and Interceptor Booster. That's one of the Tri-Fighters. And then DGS in the Roomba, the HMP with Kraken and Repulsor Lift Stabilizers. So congrats to Andrew on getting his invite. He's accompanied number 4 by at number 4 by Rocket City Rogue, who brought Django, Zam, and Grievous. So nice to see that very wholesome combo, that trio. It used to be Dirge, it's Grievous, because Grievous is 4 points in XWA, doing very well and still capable of just making people miserable. Can kind of mostly ignore the objective or ignore it when they know they can to still be able to win. One Republic list at number 5, that dude Carlos, bringing a combination of Anakin and the Y-Wing with Plasma Torpedo Anakin and a few other toys. Rick Ali has plasmas and passive sensors. And then you even have a Torrent Oddball with Prockets and Proton Torpedoes. He's got so much loadout for his 4 points. Plo Koon to be able to pass green tokens for double modded Prockets or Protorps to Oddball. That is in the Aether Sprite with CLT. And then Boost also has Proton Rockets and some other toys. That is the Z95. boost. And then just quickly, these last three, we have, who was our resistance player? That was Funwalk. Funwalk loves to play resistance. His team made it to the final to the championship in our team league. Also a former teammate of mine in draft league. He brought Heroes of Hope Poe, so not the new Poe, but the one that is at 5 points. ZZ Tolo, this is the new ZZ with the evacuation of Dakar. Zori Bliss with plasmas and wartime in that Y-Wing I5. Do copy actions for double modded shots. Teza and with wartime barrage rockets in that Y-Wing, and then Finn, the sneaky one in the pod with pattern analyzer and heroic. And we had Doug, who played Scum as well. This is a Fenrau, Dengar, Mandalorian, Kanan Jarrus in the Hawk combo. We got to see that on stream against Andrew. Kanan is mean, but he doesn't at least have Maul, so he doesn't get extra force. But still, that one time a turn to neuter a shot is very effective and can keep ships alive for very meaningful engagements.
Yeah, especially when, Dengar has that double tap ability too.
Yeah. And lastly, at number 8, we had Miguel Justiniano with the new Fenrau, the 6-point Fenrau with the from Armed and Dangerous with fearless, adaptable power systems and Beskar reinforced plating. It's just a little bit more of a flexible piece, a little slightly less predictable than the 5-point version of Fen and the Fang. He has Captain Nim with a bunch of bombs. He's a bombs, a veteran turret, dorsal, seismics, Havoc title, all that, and the Skurg bomber, which is cool. I already love what I'm seeing in this list. Mando and the N1, because of course, why not have them? And then Forlom. This is not Armed and Dangerous Forlom. This is the custom Forlom in the Mist Hunter with contraband, cybernetics, advanced sensors, and elusive. Another 4-ship scum list getting 4 wins or better and making top 8. So he rounds out top 8. No Rebels, no Empire, no First Order. Really surprised to see no Rebels or no, not Empire. No Rebels, no First Order, and am I missing a faction? Or is just those 2 factions that didn't make cut? Because obviously Brendo was playing Empire.
Yeah,
but still, a couple of factions missing out, but good variety here. Otherwise, what do you guys think of the top 8?
I mean, oh yeah, you can go first.
The first thing I noticed, I think probably just because number 3 and number 4 CIS, is that the lists are CIS had a thing for a while there where there were some pretty key obvious pieces that you should be taking, and then in the most recent, or 2 most recent points changes, they kind of tamped that down a little bit. So now it's nice to see CIS being much more diverse.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are 5 CIS lists total in this tournament, and they're all. It's nice to see that they all incorporate different pieces. I do think in the least surprising statistic, General Grievous is in 100% of CIS lists.
Yeah.
At the moment. I'm curious if he gets his day one day in the points change room, but we'll see what happens with that. But it's just nice to see that what they've done with CIS so far has mostly been working, as far as giving that faction more choices and less obvious, win conditions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing that stands out to me is just how different all of these lists are. That even between all of the the 4 points or the 4-ship scum lists, like they all have different Fenraus. We have like the SL Fenrau, but then also the 2 build your own Fenrau are completely different. Where Sev, you took Predator versus Doug, putting Fearless like on there. Instead of Boba Fett, you'll have Dengar. Like, even though they all have like the Mandalorian, that last piece that comes into it is also completely different. So it is cool to see just the wide array of creativity in all of these lists.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, looking at them, I don't see any that like I would say are obviously like, just 100% meta, right? Like,
right.
The Resistance list and the Republic list are the most like you see a lot of these pieces everywhere, but even they, like, Boost is not terribly common, and then like Finn and Teza are kind of like a little spicy for what you normally see in there. So it's It's nice to see
And
that variety.
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, even with Republic list too, like it doesn't have to be oddball. Sometimes it can be Axe. Sometimes people will be taking, Jag, or like Hound. Like the Lat Gunners are now coming back. Yeah,
Definitely. Overall, just really happy with this being kind of a first data collection, first kind of foray into tournament circuit with new content. At least I know it's online, but still a lot of people bringing a lot of stuff, a lot of excitement around this, and to see that kind of evolve into where top eight ended up, a bunch of new SLs in top eight, being able to see two new SLs in Sevwall's champion list as well. It just, not only is it kind of a beacon for a bright future, but it's just generally helpful. It's just really good to be able to take a look at this stuff and be like, okay, so we can dissect things. We have things to talk about. We have things that we can start to try to kind of idealize what trends are looking like with a new and ever evolving meta with XWA. And there's just a lot. It's just a lot of significance this tournament has beyond just for 312, which I haven't even really talked about how big of a step this is for our own channel. But I'm happy to be able to be a part of that and to help the community with that and hosting this. And Sav, congratulations again for playing very well and obviously being a pretty big part of not just our community but obviously over in NCX and being a captain over there and your role with helping XWA. I believe you play test. Correct me if I'm wrong. You do help in some way. I just want to make sure I don't get that wrong.
I did the initial round of playtesting over there in XWA. And they're a great system, and I would still be doing it. I'm just not personally compatible with extended playtesting. If I know that there's something new that I could be playing with, it makes me hate every minute that I'm not playing with it.
Yeah.
So, like, if I knew these SLs were being developed, like, if I knew what their rules were, and even when there was that period of time where you couldn't play the Mandalorian, and, like, we knew his points and we knew his rules, I was just so mad.
Yeah.
So,
people are like asking me,
can
we play this?
And I recommend everybody participate in them as much as possible if you want to be a playtester. I don't know what their process is, but reach out to somebody, but it's just not for me personally.
If you guys go reach out to me, I can direct you to who you need to talk to as well if you're interested in stuff like that. Andrew, any final thoughts on the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say it's going to be interesting comparing this and then after the Crumpet Conquest series to see the differences or to see if any of these trends continue into that, because we have that coming up next week. So I think once we have both of these conquests behind us, we're going to really start to see some more trends and maybe some other more interesting like ideations and lists, and to get a better picture of what the broad meta might be going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's coming up. I mean, it's a perfect segue. Attention, all of Europe and everyone overseas, or people who don't mind getting up super early, like Andrew and myself. The Crumpet Conquest is on May 3rd. It's going to start at 9 a.m. GMT. Player check-in will be at 8 a.m. Tickets are still available. We're still trying to boost the numbers a little bit. It's looking okay right now, but I'd like to see more if we can. So we'll include a link in the description to get a ticket to play in the Crumpet Conquest. As of right now, with our numbers, it's looking like it'll likely be 4 rounds of Swiss. It could be 5 if we get a slew of entries here in the last week. But this will be a really great opportunity to get some Europeans who claim that they are the best X-Wing players to show off their skill in this conquest. And I'm excited to stream it. And I hope to see as many of you there on the stream side, or of course playing with Andrew, trying to compete to get that invite to win that plaque. And of course, the next several conquests all the way through September have been announced, and tickets are available. So you can get tickets for Gotham City, the Pierogi, Bay Area, and Middle Earth conquests as well. So take a look at those dates, mark them in your calendar, consider playing with us in any and all or one of them. And we are excited to host you. Anything else before I just do our little outro here to wrap up?
Or Sev, if there's anything that you want to plug, because I'm good.
Plug? No. I just want to thank you guys for hosting Conquest. It's a lot of fun. I plan on participating in more of them. I'm not sure if I'll make Crumpet. That's pretty early for me, but I'll definitely be participating in all of the United States time zone ones. So you'll hopefully
Yeah.
see me again.
And thank you to Sev for also putting together some beautiful paint jobs for the Crumpet Conquest. I'm going to announce that later today.
Yeah.
Post some
Holy cow.
pictures. He did an incredible job. He's very good at doing the custom TTS paint jobs. So Sev, appreciate you volunteering your time for that as well.
Thank you. Anytime.
Yeah, I love seeing those in Discord. You do such a great job with that.
Yeah, they're very cool. All right, everyone. So just a quick heads up here. It wouldn't be a $3-1 sign without at least mentioning our Patreon really quick. A big news, big update from us on the side of Patreon. We do have our Mando N1 base plates that we're offering to our Deep Dish and Compone patrons. That's the $10 and $20 a month tiers. And on top of the beautiful Paul LaRue cards you're going to get in the mail for any of the paid tiers. If you are a Deep Dish patron or Capone, you will also get the beautiful acrylic N1 base plate made by our friends Andrew Knuckles over at Curlpaw Creative. So consider joining our Patreon, and if it wasn't for all of you supporting us over there, we would not be able to do nearly the extent of things that we can do, and we continue to plan to do. So please check that out, and really do appreciate you guys, and you can get some really awesome swag in the mail in May for our Q2 rewards. If you guys aren't in our Discord, you should consider joining and being a part of an awesome community, joining in all the various conversations happening. Of course, that is where we host our Conquest series. You should make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, like our page on Facebook. If you are a fan of the Zuck Facebook, you can certainly like us there. And of course, you can catch us live on Twitch. Well, we appreciate you all listening to episode 29 of the 312 Squadron podcast. We hope to see you in future conquests online and anywhere and everywhere. More to come on in-person streams, including our event in July we'll announce fairly soon. And that's going to do it for us. Thank you all very much for your continued support. My name is Nick Sperry.
I'm Andrew Kuba.
And I'm Bill.
And we'll catch you all very soon.
See y'all later. Well, all right.
Nice. Good cast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sev, for jumping on with us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is the second podcast I've done so far. I always find this experience so strange, but
Oh, yeah.
it's fun. I don't know how people do it weekly or bi-weekly or whatever.
Yeah, I couldn't. It would be hard for me to stay interested if we were doing it all the time. It's just one of those things. There's just also not that much to talk about. It's nice to have things to talk about now, but
I mean, honestly,
that
yeah,
much
that's
is
what it
just,
is.
it's just ridiculous, in my opinion, for us. It's not necessary, but yeah.
Yeah, hopefully those starts to be more. These events help generate that anyway. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Because-
It's
Oh, I
all
mean,
NCX Draft League exists for content for Greg, and this stuff, it helps us do the same. So you kind of need it. It's the lifeblood of the channel, really.
yeah. For me, I've been in radio since I was 15, so this is just scratching that itch for me.